Welcome back to T's Doghouse. We had an awesome opportunity, I guess it was yesterday morning now, but to talk with Jerry Kolter from Northwoods Kennels, Northwoods Bird Dogs.
Yeah, Northwoods Bird Dog.
Out in Minnesota. And he's been breeding awesome bird dogs for years and years now. So we had some real cool conversations with him, super knowledgeable. We only were able to meet for a half hour, 45 minutes or so before they needed to get on the road heading back to Minnesota. But hopefully we can have some more conversations in the future because we've had hours worth of good conversations with him.
Yeah.
So far.
Yeah, it was really cool to have Jerry here. I've visited with Jerry a lot over the phone, and we think a lot about a lot of the things. We think alike about a lot of things in the industry, and when it comes to training the dogs. And so, yeah, it was an honor to have him here at T's Doghouse, and they were picking up a puppy that we're hoping works out real well for him. But I've had a lot of great conversations with Jerry, so we were very eager to take advantage of the little bit of time that he had. You know, they were making a quick stop here to get the puppy, had a long drive ahead of them, headed home. So we were only able to take, a half hour or so, like Tanner said. But I think you'll like what you hear, and I'd encourage you to look him up at Northwoods Bird Dogs in Minnesota. He's got a good website. He's got some good articles he's written on that website also. Great guy. They breed some really nice dogs. Really enjoyed meeting his wife, Betsy, as well.
Yep. We'll link the website down in the description so you can just click that there. It's a real impromptu conversation. Yeah. So we are going to jump into the clip kind of mid-conversation. We figured, we should record this if we're having the conversation. So
we didn't get mics.
So we didn't. Yeah, there's no mics. It's kind of bad sound with dogs barking in the background, and it's real raw, but it was a good conversation. So we hope you enjoy it after. And so you and he'll talk for a while in this clip, and then we'll visit a little bit about, kind of recap some of the things that were talked about before the camera got turned on and stuff. So awesome. Well, enjoy.
We got a call a minute ago from our neighbor that's also his aunt, or his neighbor that's also his aunt. Somebody just brought your dog back.
Digging out.
Yeah, well,
It's the beauty of winter.
He learned how to flip the latch, so I got that fixed.
Yeah.
And then now he just dug out, and he's gonna learn to climb out. He's an wild man, but
It's kind of cool when you get those dogs,
get
but it's a pain.
Yeah. He's hugely intelligent. They have a blast, awesome. And he's an extremely nice dog, but he just watches and figures everything out. Intelligence can be a catch-22.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. We got to clip all our gates, and luckily we don't have a lot of climbers.
Yeah.
And I really don't want them to learn to climb because we have a 5-foot perimeter fence. Around the whole thing, and I really don't want to learn. Like if I'm working a dog, I make sure nobody's out because that's about the time. Then it only takes. We've talked about that dog training. If you can communicate to a dog right, they can learn it in one time. Because they can learn to open a gate and never forget it. They can learn to climb once, and anything that's to their advantage, they can learn in one time.
Yeah.
So how stupid are they? They're not that stupid. You should be able to get them to learn in one time if you're really good.
Yeah.
And the motivation is really right.
Yeah, that's why everything that whenever I'm talking to people and everything I'm doing, I'm always thinking about communication. Mm-hmm. And we posted a thing on communication once, and I remember this because it was when we first posted some things, and I was still concerned about other people's opinion, And so this lady got on there and wrote something about blah 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 communication. Let's talk about dog training, and I was like, oh well, that's interesting because I thought that's what I was talking about when I said communication. Because if you can communicate it so the dog understands it, it's learned.
Yeah.
And I think when we say, it takes a lot of repetitions, which I'm a big fan of repetitions, but I think the reason it takes a lot of repetitions is because it gives more opportunity for the dog to decipher what we were trying to explain, right? But if we did explain it right and very clearly, then it would take one repetition. But because we're humans and they're dogs, and it's hard to get that to all translate correctly, then we do a lot of repetitions so that the dog has more opportunity to decipher what it is we're trying to tell it, But your thing about the latch, or there's so many things that dogs learn one time. You show it to them one time, and they're going to remember it their whole life. So we know that it can happen quickly. So I'm very involved in the reining horses too. made my living for about 25 years doing that. And I just recently went down to a symposium that a friend of mine, Andrea Fapani, put on, and it was great. They got a bunch of reining trainers, the top trainers in the nation together, and there was this Nick Dowers made a comment that really stuck. He said, when we're asking a question and looking for an answer in these animals, so we're asking them something, we're looking for them to get the right answer so we can reward them and let them know that's what they're looking for. He said, I think a lot of times we run into problems because we ask the question, we get the right answer, so then we ask the question again, and then we get the right answer, and we ask the question again, and now we have a dog, he was talking about a horse, but it's the same with the dog, that starts thinking, I must not be giving the right answer because they keep asking the same question. And so then they start looking for new answers again. And I mean, that just stuck with me. I've been thinking about it ever since because I thought I am a fan of repetition, but how are we doing our repetitions? And are we doing them in a way that is letting the dog know that it definitely has the right answer? So if I ask something, we've been working on something, the dog gets it right, and I say, I mark it with the positive marker, and I give a reward, and I really communicate, that's what I was looking for. Maybe I benefit by moving on to different questions and then coming back to that question again later, to give them another repetition in getting the right answer rather than just diving right into the same question again and again and again. I think of that like if somebody's doing, woe breaking, and we're walking and we're stopping and we're still, we're going through woe, and they get it right and they do a good job. And so then we go a little bit and then we ask again, and then we go a little bit and we ask again. And it's this mundane practice that in my mind I've kind of thought, well, it's just the drilling that it takes. But now I wonder, is that really that effective of drilling, or would I be better off to go through it, get the right answer, move on, do a few other things, ask one more time, get the right answer, and put it up? And 2 repetitions that day, is that going to be better than 10 repetitions that might leave the dog thinking I might not be getting this right?
I think you're right. I mean, I've thought a lot about that too. And I think that, like retrieving, in, out, and I went out and visited Bill Gibbons. I never knew him. But
I didn't get to know him, but I certainly know him.
I spent a week with him and flew out there. This was many, many, many years ago. And got to know him. So we talked on and off and things like that. But they knew a lot of this stuff back then. He said the same thing. You do this retrieve, he puts it in, takes it out. As soon as he holds it, you take it out, you move on. And I thought of that, and I thought, repetition, if you think of a military and stuff, it's made to make a response that you have without thinking.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
But do we want them to really respond without? It depends on what you want the dog to do. Do you want them to respond without thinking, so kind of robotic?
Yeah.
Or do you want them to really think and do it?
Yeah.
And I think what you said, if you want them to think and do it, I think they get bored too. I think they're happy to do it once or twice, and especially a bright dog. And now they're going, we're just got to do this over and over and over. And then I think resentment can build up. And now you go back, like you said, go backwards. I think the ultimate thing is right. Do a couple, and actually if they do it right, even like I said in the bird field, you plant 3 pigeons and I'll go out and work them, and the dog will do just what he should do on the first one, I quit.
Yeah.
I go, he can't do it any better. You're not going to do it 2 more times and wait for him to screw up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, let me say, well, you didn't train them very long that day. No, but I'm not getting trained by the hour. I'm paid by the hour. I'm getting paid by the progress.
Right.
And we made a ton of progress right there.
Right.
Especially if he did it the last 5 times, he never did it right. And finally he did it right.
Yeah.
And quit. And that's, to me, I've heard that from a lot of the old trainers.
It's a real popular thing that I hear said a lot is that you can't treat a dog like a human. And there's a lot of truth behind that statement. However, the more I work with the dogs, the more I see their similarities, the way they think with the way we think. And so if we were going out and you're repeating something over and over, and nobody's ever telling you how good you did, then how do you know how good you are? You might think that you're just not doing it right. Mm-hmm. If you go out and you feel forced to do something, whenever a human or an animal is forced, it always creates resentment. What if you're bored to death? What if somebody's asking you a question over and over, and you've already given them the answer, and you're just sick and tired of this whole asking the same question to get the same answer? Even if you know it's the right answer, you're just like, this is ridiculous. And so when you're yeah, so I always look at the dogs and I think, how would I handle these situations? Would I feel like, oh, I'm good at this? This guy, he's helping me learn, and I'm showing off, and everybody, you're playing basketball and you're helping those kids play basketball, and you're complimenting them, and they're strutting around like they're the stuff. Well, that's a better a better mindset for a game than going around like, oh, he told me 7 times that I did it wrong yesterday, and never told me I did it right, and yeah.
Right. No, I think there's a lot to that. I really do.
I think that's one of the things that works so well, kind of that variability, but we do with the bird-to-bird skeleton, right? Where we teach a number of different things in a controlled setting. So we'll do a specific drill to help with the wind or to draw the dog out or to help with recall. But as quick as we can, we take that and we're going to put it into the bird-to-bird skeleton where it's part of the game. We're going bird to bird, we're playing the game, and it's all built off of that. That's what we call it on the courses, is the bird to bird skeleton. But as we build these other pieces, we're very quick to incorporate everything into that base game, where we'll teach a certain behavior, but as quick as we can, we're going to include it with all the other behaviors we've been teaching in the drills until it becomes a whole rather than just specific drills that we're doing.
Yeah, so you're getting repetitions, but of situations, but each one is its new thing.
Right, and moving on.
Yeah,
kind of moving on and challenging a little more. That's just that when I started a long time ago. I mean, we had a 2-month, basically stagger wing and shot program. We do that in 1 month, and really, I have them there in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Just because I just move them along so much faster. I'm able to read the dog so much better. And the dogs come through it when you don't. Like I said, when you don't bore them, everything's new and exciting, and the dogs they just look great. They don't ever look trained.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you just keep moving on. I think there's a lot to it. But again, that's easy to say when you've seen a lot of dogs. You have to know when to move on and when to stop.
Yeah.
Right? Like you said, do one and okay, that's it for today. Or maybe you do 3 or 4 or 5 and move on to a point, but you don't want to quit at that. You don't want to move so far that you're quitting on not a good point either.
Yeah.
So, you got to read that. That's why these people can only, I feel for them that aren't set up and can only train on a weekend, and they train a lot. I'm driving 20 miles and I got to do this.
Yes.
I read a study on the internet somewhere. It was, a scientific type study where they studied training sessions and lengths and learning. And what they came up with was that frequent lessons of very short duration, we've all know this, but are much better than infrequent ones of long duration.
Yeah.
The dogs will move along a lot faster.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's great stuff. I recently just did I don't even know what to call them, train retrieve, forced fetch. There's so many different terminologies and there's so many different approaches to it, and my approach is a very, very low. I'm really teaching signals, physical cues to do something that are matched with the verbal cues to do something, and very reward based. And so I think my program's quite different, but I have it set up where I've got my bench, and then I've got those that have watched some of our videos, we've got these obstacles, right, which are these tires with boards on them, and we stack them, and we got some wire spools and different things. And so we would go from thing to thing, and I'd ask her to get up on the bench, and I'd have her do something, I'd have her come down and do other things that I'd taught her, and it was this time was much more mobile in, is that the word I want to use? But I moved from thing to thing throughout, and it wasn't nearly the number of repetitions altogether, and my progress was quick. And the reason that was really interesting with this dog is because she was what people would tag with the word soft, which I think is used in so many ways that it's really useless to just call a dog soft because it doesn't tell us anything about it. But she would want to shut down, to be overly careful and stop trying if she was confused. And so it went so smooth, and the result was so fabulous, and I felt like it was, anyway, I'd learned a lot, but it was off of that thought that moving on, challenging the dog, letting the dog know you believed it, understood, and we're going to move to the next thing.
I think that's great. I mean, it's the same thing. I've never done a ton of forage fetch, but a lot of it I just learned from books and over the years before there was YouTube and all that stuff, right? when I went to Georgia, I got tied up with some guys down there that did a lot of retrieve training.
Yeah.
I went and watched them, and what I realized was it was no different than the way I learned to whoa break dogs. If you did it right, then your timing was good. And I didn't move around on a bench, but I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
You can really move them along fast.
Yeah.
I do the same thing. You got to use a physical cue. I pinch their ear a little bit, but I'm not trying to really inflict pain. I'm just trying to make them understand. I'm trying to use as little pressure as possible.
Yeah.
Right. And again, very short sessions. If you should do this for me, if you do this for me, then we're going to do something you really like.
Yes.
It's why I do most of my day training out in the bird field. Because there's pigeons. It's like Bill Gibbons. I mean, they're not pointing a pigeon all the time, but there's birds around. And if there's not birds around, they're in a field where they've seen birds.
Yeah.
So I call them, they're like fun bumpers.
Yeah.
They're going out here where birds are fun to a bird dog.
Yeah.
And now I'm just going to ask you to do a little bit of this, and then guess what? You get a bird.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so if I tried to do the same thing in the yard, and I did years ago, I didn't know what I knew now, but I never got the same result. They more looked like they were being trained. We're out around the birds. They don't look like they're being trained.
Yeah. We've talked before about, the idea of shaping and some of the things that we do with our puppies and by shaping I mean guiding the dog in such a way that it chooses to do the things you want it to do,
Yeah, absolutely.
because it believes that's what's bringing the result that it's looking for. And so if we just think of us in our environment, the dog is constantly shaping to the environment. So if we control what's happening in the environment to get the thought process we want in the dog, then the dog's going to decide to do the things we want it to do almost on its own. Right. And then we can put things into place to be able to reinforce that, to be able to say whoa, to stop them from moving if they decide to move. But so there's so many things that we'll do with the puppies. That's the whole first year is essentially just a year of shaping. I would like to teach everything that I'm hoping that dog is going to learn in the long term. I would like to get it to decide to do all those things on its own, in that first year, if I could.
Yeah.
And so what kind of things, you're here picking up a puppy, and when you go home, what kind of things do you start with in your puppy program?
I do similar with you. I mean, as soon as people take our puppies at 8 weeks, I use the clicker, and I do that marker training, and I marker train a lot of stuff. And I'll marker train sit, kennel, place. After seeing what you did here, I started with my puppies this year, teach them to jump up on a crate, right? And since it was too tall at first, because all I got is a small little crate, and I don't have this kind of room, I just started putting dog benches on little veranda beds, one on top of the other, and then I thought I'm going to get them jumping from crate to crate. But what I find with my bird dogs is when they're young, they're really food motivated.
Yes.
And as they get a little bit older, they're not quite as food motivated anymore. And this is just in the same office. They're more interested in this and that. And so that's why I like to get that out of the way young. All those little things. I don't ever lure them at all. I'll sit there, and usually if you are ready, and I put the crate in the office and let them in and put the door open. Puppies are curious. They go right in that crate the first time because I click and treat.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then try to get them to do all this. I used to lure everybody. I still do a little bit of luring.
Yeah.
But I used to lure them, and what I tell people is very different. I said, when you lure a dog, I said, they're just following your hand.
Yeah.
But I said, when you're marker training, they got to think about what they want, what they need to do to get the reward. That's a very different way to train.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had them when, once they know the word, place, sit, kennel, they'll come in and they'll run in the kennel before I say anything. And I say, right? And they'll sit in that kennel, look at me, and they'll run out and maybe go in the place, You know what I mean? I'll say sit, right? And they go and do the wrong thing. And I just tell them until they do it right.
Yeah.
Right? But they're thinking, what do I need to do to get that treat? Yeah. It's really cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
So
I do things like that.
Yeah, we see a lot of that with the pups too, where we'll do the luring and we'll do everything through 3 lines of communication, right? So vocally, luring, and the leash.
Mm-hmm.
But we do a lot with, when we bring the dogs in, we'll bring a bunch in at a time and then just start marking volunteering, right?
Yeah.
And so as they get up on things, as they sit on stuff, as they're going to the bed, as they're going in the crates, they do that, you see their brain working on how have I been rewarded in the past?
Right.
And I'm going to start replicating those behaviors, and you can get very dependable behaviors, not because they're forced to do it, but because they want to do it. They think this is what...
It's a game.
Yeah, it's a game.
And
That's
they
what
want to play.
Says it makes their dreams come true, right? That's what they're looking for. And
absolutely.
so, yeah, it's pretty cool, all the things that you can do with that. And when we'll do multiple dogs, so he'll have dogs all doing different things at the same time in the same room. And, yeah, because it's all based on just the fact that that's what they're wanting to do, not that it's some under command
It's-
behavior, but
it's
thinking
fun.
about it.
It's fun when you come in here and you've seen we get all the puppies out in here, and even when you have a lot of puppies, if you'll come in and then we've done things. They've gotten up on the tire and I fed them up there. I've gotten them on the tire and they've sat, and then I've rewarded them for sitting, and so they're starting to figure out. Just as little tiny puppies are starting to figure out some of this. And if I'll have my treat bag on and I come stand in the middle of the floor and I watch, the puppies will be running and doing things, and then inevitably after we've done this for a little bit, I can sit there and watch, and then somebody will go get on a tire and sit down and look at me, and I'll be like, that puppy knows, and so I'll communicate. But the thing that I think is so awesome about what you were talking about, where you're paying the volunteer work, if you will, you're letting them know that's what I was looking for, and they're figuring these things out. Is it opens up in their mind? They realize that not only do we communicate with them, but they can communicate with us. The example I use all the time is going to the door, and if I can go to the door and make my dog sit, people will say, "Oh, it's good to teach your dog to sit when it comes to the door." So you go to the door, you make your dog sit, you open the door, and then you take your dog out the door. And every time they go and say sit, and then they go out the door, and it's like a control exercise. Well, you can take that same exercise and you can go to the door, and if you've had the dog sit a couple times at the door, you can go to the door and stand by the door and just stand by the door. And you watch, and your dog, if it understands that it's sat a lot of times, then it'll just look at you, and then eventually it'll sit, because it'll be like, what are you waiting for? And it's trying to figure it out. And if when it sits, you mark it with your positive marker, whether it's a clicker or a yes or good or whatever you want to use, and you mark that behavior and then immediately open the door, then what you communicated to the dog was that behavior will get me to open the door. So if you want to ask me to open the door, sitting by the door is how you get me to open the door. Not very many repetitions, and you'll be sitting in a room and you'll look over and there's your dog sitting by the door. And that dog's over there trying to communicate with you that it needs to go out, and in no time at all you taught your dog that it should sit at the door to ask to go out. And so there's so many things like that if we're aware, we realize they are trying to communicate with us. And as we teach them a behavior, and then we reward the fact that they're volunteering behaviors, we reward them for trying to communicate with us or trying to figure out the right answer, then we'll get a dog that in its mind is constantly trying to figure out the right answer. And that's a trainable mind.
And that dog's just going to work with you anywhere.
Yeah.
No,
I've definitely seen with the puppies that when you leave having done what we do, and then you go into the field, it's so different than it used to be when I take my puppy to the field. And it was chaos until finally you got enough control put into this dog, right?
Right.
And instead, it's a partnership from day one, and it just carries that way, and it's a very rewarding way to do things.
Right. I bet people they'll be asking me things. They'll say, "Well, I'm not a dog trainer." And I said, "Oh yeah, you are." I said, you're a dog trainer. You just don't know it. I said, you're training your dog every moment you're around them.
Yeah.
For one, they're watching you. What's so amazing is the dogs pick up. People put up what these called micro expressions, right? Some people can read these. They're so fast you can't catch them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember if they use this when they're interrogating people or whatever, but we all give those off, and the dogs can read them. It's like if you're sitting there at the end of the night, and right before you go to bed, of course, you always let the dog out. But if you're sitting there in the couch and watching TV, and you go, "I need a glass of water," and you get up and go right by the door to get a glass of water, the dog don't move.
Right.
But if you sit there and think, "Go to bed and let the dog out," and you get up just like the same way, and the dog gets up because it knows.
Yeah.
That stuff is amazing to me.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. How easy it is for your dog to be excited because he knows you're headed outside and he wants to go.
Right.
Or just not interested at all because he knows you're just going downstairs or you're just going somewhere in the house.
Right. We think we don't do anything different, and it could be just a little twitch somewhere, or I don't know. All dogs have to do, especially a house dog, almost all day long when you're around, is watch you.
Yeah.
And I do. You might not think they're watching.
Yeah.
They're watching all the time.
Yeah.
Or listening, or they're amazing.
You listen to how often people say with their dogs, with no warning. Like I hear that with the aggressive dogs that we'll work with, where people are like, unprovoked, there was no warning, there was no, and you're like, I'm pretty sure there was. I bet there was warning, and I bet it was provoked in the dog's mind.
Right.
But we don't know everything that's going on, right? And then you'll hear people say, well, a dog's a good judge of character, and I think, well, maybe if it's got to meet a lot of characters, But a lot of these dogs haven't met hardly anybody else,
Right.
and so they're not a good judge of character. They're just letting you know they're scared.
Right.
But the idea that they could be a good judge of character lets us know they're paying attention to a lot more than just what's on the surface. And when we watch them interact with each other, there's so much communication going on that we don't recognize, but they're communicating with each other.
Right.
And
Right.
you know, things where all of a sudden the whole kennel's barking and you didn't hear anything. You don't know what
Right.
set that off.
Right.
You don't know what triggered that. You know, dogs that know when my dog knows when my truck
Sure.
is coming down the road,
Yeah.
but there's a lot
Well,
of
they
other
see it.
Ford diesel pickups.
Right.
And they go driving by and the dog doesn't get excited, but
Right.
but when that truck comes, so there's so much there that we don't recognize. But I've had a lot of times I've been asked, when do you start training the puppy? And like you just said, well, the second you pick the puppy up, you start training the puppy. So the key is that we need to become aware
Mm-hmm.
of what we're doing and do it purposefully,
Right.
so that we're
Right.
training the puppy what we want to train it. Because
Right.
just sitting and letting a puppy grow up, thinking we're not training because we're going to wait later to
Right.
start the training. No, you're training from day one.
Yeah.
You know.
No, it's the other reason I like to tell people, and almost no one does this, but I go, when you get a puppy, I said, use that crate. I said, if you're not paying attention to what the dog's doing and stuff, and you're not in the mood to do something constructive, either let it play somewhere where it doesn't get in any trouble, or have it in its crate. And then when you interact with it, be specific in what you're going to do with it. You got to kind of be thinking about what you're going to do with this puppy to mold it, and not just let it out and see what happens. You know, I mean, same with a started dog, right? That we'll sell to people. I say, now, confine it to a spot, you know, and if you could, and some people have done this. I said, put a leash on it, let it drag a leash around your house so you can get at it right now if something goes wrong, or you know, if it's doing something you don't like. But inevitably, I get a video of the dog laying on the bed the first day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, to me, honestly, and I've had dogs on my bed years and years ago, but I don't think that's a play. I don't think for most dogs, maybe you can get by with it, but it's not the best thing to have your dog sleeping on the bed with you. I really don't. I really think that's sending the wrong message.
Yeah.
You know, but I know it happens all the time. But
You know, I'd have to think too with that looking at all the other messages you're sending. I think that when we see those, to say that a dog can't sleep in the bed and be a great dog, well, that would be a false statement, because it can. But so often, if the dog has full reign of the house, the bed, the furniture, the everything, then I think that there's probably a good chance that it doesn't see you as a leader. It just sees you as another
part
one of the
environment.
the environment, part of the environment.
absolutely,
And
they might see themselves as the leader.
Very
I mean,
true,
that's where
yeah.
I've seen it. Not a lot, but you know, the dog's good at me, but it growls at my wife.
Yeah.
The wife jumps in bed. Well, I can tell you right off the bat, that's not a good thing. The
Yeah.
dog sees itself as higher than the wife,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
or whoever that may be, or the kid, or whatever. And that's why I say the whole bed thing is not a good thing.
Yeah.
Right? It's just,
I think that for the most part, dogs, I mean, I guess this is a statement that can't be made as a blanket statement, because certainly there's dogs with more, a little more authoritative type personality.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, dogs are pretty quick to give leadership to the humans. I think you have to be passive to have a dog that's really the leader. You know, I think they become the leader not because they're fighting for the position. That's I guess the best way to say it. They're not fighting for the position of leader. It's not a battle to see who's the leader. But if we're not a leader, they're just going to be a leader by default.
right.
Right.
Leadership
So
has
I
to
agree.
exist somewhere.
Yeah, it has to. There has
They
to
don't
be
care who
leadership.
gives it.
Somebody
Yeah,
has
it
to be
has to
giving
have that.
information, and they want to follow the person that's making their dreams come true, as we say.
Yeah.
But if there's nobody there, if everybody's just kind of a servant to them, and there's nobody there that is helping direct and guide,
Yeah.
then the dog just has to figure it out on its own, and it's going to figure it out like a dog, and then that's why we have problems.
Yeah.
But
I'd say
it's because
100%.
of passive living. It's not that the dog needs. We hear words like discipline, and you gotta set boundaries, and then people get all upset because this seems so rigid and authoritative, and it's not the case at all. But the dog needs some help. It's a
Yeah.
human world.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
needs some help, and
Yeah.
and you have expectations and things that you want to do. So it needs some help, some guidance, so that it can figure out where it fits in. So I think our problems aren't because we're not authoritative enough. It's because we're way too passive.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
A dog really wants someone to lead it. Most dogs. let's say most
Yeah.
of them aren't born
Yeah.
to be alpha.
Yeah,
I don't think
exactly.
I don't think they are. And but if you don't take that position and go, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to call the shots then.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And then as they start calling the shots, maybe they start liking calling the shots.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think a lot of people don't even they're letting the dog call the shots, and they don't.
Don't even know
When
it.
you tell them, well, it's because your dog has leadership in the house. You know, that's why it's growling at your kids. Is it because it believes that it should be giving instruction to your kids?
Yeah.
And so it thinks nobody is giving the instruction.
Right.
But if you just step in and start giving instruction, it'll be like, oh, you got this?
Right.
Cool. That makes it easier
right.
for me.
Right.
you
Yeah.
know?
I don't got to worry about it.
Yeah, I don't need to worry about
they're
it.
Happier.
They don't listen to me very well anyway.
Right. That's right. That's
So-
right.
Yeah, it's amazing how quick. Yeah, even the aggressive dogs that we have, how quickly they'll change as soon as someone starts giving leadership.
Mhm.
Where we'll have like that Max dog we had in, that it was a mess for the first 15, 20
Well,
minutes.
yeah, he tried to eat
He
me.
tried to. Yeah, he
It
was.
was-
It was not a good thing. And we have a broom handle that's still all chewed up because we weren't going to put our hands next to him.
Right.
And so we were using that broom handle though to get his feet moving, and really quickly once he started moving, we were dictating where his feet moved, and then we started working and walking through the obstacles on the leash, and so they have to follow. You've got the leash on them, and it was amazing how quickly it all went away. He was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, all right, cool, you lead." Like, no big deal. But
Yeah, that was
it was as aggressive as a case as
that was
we've
the
had
most
in a
severe-
long
yeah.
time. You know.
Not the most severe. I guess I've had one other that I thought was it was a little more exciting for me than he was, but he was very exciting.
Yeah.
And but once he started to move and realize what was going on, people, if they had watched it, they would have thought I was working a horse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it was lunging. He was just on a
Sure.
loose rope,
Right.
and he was trying to be. I mean, he was worried about me, and he was trying to eat me. But I didn't have to use any kind of discipline.
Right.
You know, I
Right.
didn't have to. I had a broomstick because it was better for him to bite it than me,
Right.
and I used it to allow him to bite it instead of me.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have to use it in any kind of aggressive manner, and I just moved my feet and let him figure out where he could move to stay away from me. And then pretty soon, then he was walking with me, and then he was getting on the pedestals, and then he was eating food out of my hand, and then he changed it very very
Changed so
quickly.
fast. It's the leadership
But
was
the
in place.
leadership
It was
was,
the same thing when I worked that scout dog that you had in. He was real good with you, but still worried about new people.
Mhm.
And I came in, he was not having it. He was real worried about me and hiding behind him. We were sitting probably from me to that tire away,
Oh,
and he'd
yeah,
hide so
yeah.
I couldn't see him, behind the leg. And so that's what we just took the leash, and it was all following. I wouldn't face him. I wanted him to feel real comfortable. And animals are usually more comfortable following something. That's how they learn about it and really get accustomed to it. And 10 minutes or so, and he was good. He was eating food out of my hand, but it was just walking around the obstacles and helping them learn that someone else was in control, and that's a lot less stressful for them.
Mhm.
When you don't have to control everything,
Right.
it's the same way with anyone who's planned a party. Knows it's a lot more fun to be at a party than to plan a party.
Right. Right.
It's less stressful when you're not the one in charge.
Right.
And so I think that's how it is so much for dogs too.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Awesome. We hope you enjoyed that clip. It was, like I said, it was a real fun conversation and real fun having him here and being able to visit with him. Super knowledgeable guy, very well versed as far as the studies and things that are being done in the industry, as well as the personal experience of all the breeding and training and things like that. So a lot of awesome knowledge and insights that we were able to visit about with him.
Yeah, that as we started off, the time with Jerry yesterday morning, he and I sat down and started talking, and then Tanner was setting up the camera and the lights so that we could try to capture what we had time to capture. But they had an appointment, and then they had to head back, so we were very limited on the time. So when we got started, we immediately started talking about genetics, and he was here picking up a puppy that we're hoping works out real well in his program, and so we just started talking about how we make our breeding decisions and what the most important things to consider are. And there's so much information out there now, so different than our predecessors that did such a great job of helping us have the dogs that we have. They didn't have nearly the scientific knowledge that is available now. But I feel like, though, a lot of times it's real easy to get so caught up in the names on the paper and on scientific ideas that sometimes we look right past the animals that are before us, right? And I think, in my opinion, the most important thing is the animals before us. More than knowing COI and knowing, different genetic things that we can test for, and all those things. That's good information to help us understand what's in front of us, but it's not the basis. It can't come before what's in front of us, because in my mind there's so many different variables that can come into play genetically that are the best answer to how our genetics are working is what's in front of us. The dog we're working with. That's the best answer to the genetics and where they're at, and what needs to change, and what we want to add, and what we want to try to move away from, or anything like that. And so it was very interesting to talk to him.
Yeah, I think that's so important and one of the things you guys talked about was the importance of the family of dogs, if you will. And we've talked about that in different podcasts and stuff we've done too, but the people talk a lot about breed and what breed is going to be best. And the answer is there's probably a family of dogs within any breed that could fit any number of people's needs and lifestyles. And so it's important to know and understand, like you were saying, the dogs in front of you and the family of dogs that those dogs come from, and that's where you can build the consistency of good dogs. And it's important to know, because he talked a lot about the genetics that can be carried over, often unseen, through generations, that can lie dormant. And he had talked about a study. I don't remember what industry it was done in, but it was specifically in reference to hip dysplasia. And they were studying the dogs that had, kind of the base of the study was showing that dogs that you could breed to a dog with good hips that came from a litter that all had great hips, and you'd be better off breeding to that dog than breeding to a dog that had great hips but came from a litter that only had fair hips. And that the hip dysplasia and hip issues came more familial than simply what the parents had specifically. And so I thought that was really interesting, and it shows a lot of times they can go generations before you see something. Positive traits, negative traits that don't really even matter, with color and pigment on the nose and the feet, and there's all these different traits, but that it can know what you're looking for, and then know the family, because there's a lot of things that make up these dogs, and oftentimes the recessive traits you don't see, and so there can be a lot going on when you're looking for a dog and the family of dogs that you want to try and breed from.
I think too we see in some animals different links. Maybe they think cancer is linked to something, or epilepsy, and seizures is seen linked to another trait, and sometimes it can give ideas of what's there. But then in a different family, you might have the trait that epilepsy is linked to, but never see the epilepsy, because since you have that trait doesn't mean you also have the other. So that's why, some of the scientific things that we think we know can lead us into places that we're either overly confident or fearful of things that we don't need to be fearful of. It's really hard to sort out, because we can't test every dog and every genetic trait that dog has. We just know the ones that are exposed. We can look at history in the family and get ideas of what other ones might be laying dormant because mom had them or dad had them, or grandma or grandpa, or grandma or grandpa's siblings, or and that's why family is so important, knowing the family, because it can help you either have confidence in the cleanliness of the gene pool, regarding certain things, or it'll help you know that you need to be extra careful, because that this could be in there because it was in there a few generations ago. And so it helps us make better decisions. But a thing that he pointed out that I thought was really interesting, experience that he had, and I don't remember what the trait was, or if he even told us the trait, but he went 7 generations of breeding where he had the parents of the dogs for 7 generations, and then had something come up that he had never seen for 7 generations. And so where did that come from, and how long did it lay dormant before suddenly it appeared? So there's so much, it's so complex that I think that's where our greatest benefit is knowing the family. And that's why I think from a breeding standpoint, being involved and keeping, like we keep large numbers of the puppies that we raise. And it's very beneficial because when I look at a cross and I say, well, I'm repeating this cross because I loved the other cross, or this is the third time I'm repeating this cross because I've loved both the other crosses. I don't mean I loved the puppy I kept. I mean, I trained 5 or 6 out of the 10 puppies in it.
Yeah.
I knew it. And so I could see how good, and were there great ones? Were they pretty even across the board, all similar? Did I have an extreme difference where I had a dog that definitely wasn't working for what we were looking for, and then another one that was phenomenal? And I've seen all of that. I've had litters where I thought, wow, this might be the worst puppy I ever raised, and that might be one of the best puppies I ever raised in the same litter. And so that family, that's telling us a lot that helps us be able to make the next decision, versus if you keep a puppy, one puppy, or you keep none of the puppies, and then you just talk to people on the phone about the dogs. I mean, all the information you can get's good, and not everybody gets to keep all the puppies. But I guess my whole point is the more we can know about how the entire litter worked, that lets us know, was it kind of a freak thing that we got this one amazing puppy, or did we do something that was producing really consistently that's showing us that it's a pretty clean gene pool, pretty predictable gene pool. So I think that's, it was a great conversation just thinking about that. But family is so critical.
Yeah.
Another very interesting thing that we talked about was, you led into it with the hip dysplasia study, but are we breeding an extreme? Like, we're watching for an extreme animal that we're breeding. I love that because I feel like that lifts the median. If I have an extreme animal that it's not very often you reproduce that extreme animal, right? So if I've got just
an outlier,
if we consider something a freak of nature, in some way, and we breed it, we usually don't get something like it or better. We usually get something somewhere below it, but it kind of helps lift the gene pool. And so I love the extremes. But if you're always breeding for extremes, then you might lose consistency. But if you're always breeding for consistency, you might lose overall quality, because you just have that natural decreasing of the family, I guess. So those things have to be considered. Your line breeding or your breeding within the family can solidify a lot of traits to where you get more consistency in your litter, but maybe you don't get greatness. Maybe you just get real consistency of that. And then where do you go? What do you do to try to find that next individual that moves things to a new level, that greatness? And then once you get that, then what are you going to do to try to solidify those traits enough that you've elevated the whole family? And that's a real, it's a tricky thing to do. It's not about scientific testing all the time. Some scientific testing might let you know how good you're doing at locking in the genes that you're hoping to lock in. And so that's where I think all that other stuff is support around it. What's the pedigree? It's all support around what you're getting. But ultimately, the proof's in the pudding.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's something that I've had a lot of conversations with people about breeding specifically, and I think that's something that we sharing our thoughts on it is kind of confusing for people maybe at the start, and then as they start to see what we're seeing, they're going, okay, that makes sense, because there's a lot of situations where we could have 2 great dogs and we won't breed those 2 great dogs because the things they have in common and the things that they're great at and the things that they're not as great at aren't complementary for each other. So it's going to create too much. There's not going to be enough consistency in the litter. You might get some freaks with the athletic ability, but you also might get just as many that are messed up in this other area that they're not as strong in. And that's not to say that either dog isn't fit for breeding,
Right.
but that cross
Yeah.
isn't the right cross in
Yeah.
our mind. And we do that a lot, where we have a lot of dogs that we'll breed them to certain males or to certain females, but we won't breed them to other males and females
Yeah.
because we know what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And so if it's not going to give us if that consistency level isn't going to be a consistency in the attributes we're looking for, then we'll make a different cross.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that with breeding, it's so much, it can be called an art and a science, but a lot of it is just experienced guessing.
Yeah.
That we have enough experience to be able to say, that's not what we're personally looking for. That's not
Yeah.
what our preference is. And so we're going to take this cross somewhere else, but it's still a guessing game.
Yeah, exactly. It's an educated guess.
Yep.
There's a lot of educated guessing.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's so much difference in what I see as my ideal dog, what's in my mind about what I want to produce. Excites me a lot, but it might be something different than what somebody else is thinking of. We get people that call us, so we have certain sizes of dogs that we prefer. I've bred a lot of dogs that didn't fit within that preferred because they had the traits that I wanted. But I have a preferred dog when I'm looking, and I think, that's the size I like. That's the coloring I like. That's the amount of ticking, or what, that's the dog that I like. But then we get calls for people saying, hey, I'm specifically looking for, say, a 35-pound female. And I think, I'm specifically looking for larger females than that.
Yeah.
But that's their desire, their preference. They've had dogs like that. That's what they want. Yeah. Other people might have a dog that is a color variation that I'm not real high on, or has a gait that doesn't fit the gait that I'm looking for in a dog while it's moving, and then they want to breed it. And then, a lot of people would say, oh, well, that's not the ideal, so, you don't want to breed it. But if it's not a problem, it's just different.
Yep.
I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
And I don't need to be there telling them that they need to think differently than they think, right?
Yeah.
And so there's when it comes to breeding, that's why I think that's why there's so many discussions, is because people just have different ideas, about what's the most important thing that they're looking for and how they're going to get there. And I guess if we're doing the breeding and we have the goal in mind, then we get to be our own judge.
Yeah.
And the proof's in the pudding. If you're getting what you like, then
Yep.
go for it. And if you're not, then change things up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so important from a breeding standpoint to know that, because that's what you talk a lot about. We don't breed for the public. And it's not that we don't sell the dogs, but it's that the things
or enjoy selling the dogs,
Yeah.
or get excited when somebody gets a
When
great
we
dog
do.
from us. I love it.
And we sell a lot of puppies, but our breeding choices are to get the things we're looking for in the horseback field trial competitions we're competing in.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a different breed choice. Like we talked about the preference in the crosses we make, that's going to be different than someone who's breeding with the goal of selling every puppy.
Yes.
Because the preference is going to be different for the people that are, if you're breeding for the public in general, you'll make choices different than if you're breeding for the most extreme athlete you can find.
Yes.
And I think that's important from a breeding standpoint, but it's also very important from a person looking for a dog standpoint, and knowing what families you're getting into and what type of dog you're buying. Because, for example, my dog Rev, I love that dog to death. I have so much fun with him. But I'm incredibly active, my lifestyle is. Mm-hmm. I hunt big game. I hunt a lot with the dogs. I run 4 to 6 miles a day. I do all of this stuff, and he comes with me for all of it. He hunts, he scouts with me. I've got a pad that he lays on next to me while I glass. He does all the hiking with me.
Yeah.
We run a bunch of miles every day. We do a lot together, and we're very active. And he's a very high energy dog, so it works for him. He can hang with me all day long and do just great. And then I've got a cousin and his wife who live with me, and they take a walk every morning, and they asked if they could take Rev with them, and I told them sure. And they got back, and they were overwhelmed because it was just way too much energy for what they envisioned a nice walk with their dog would be like.
Right.
And part of that's because he's a puppy and he still has all that rambunctious energy and stuff. But part of it also is that he's a dog that wouldn't fit their lifestyle.
Right.
Because that's not what he was bred for. It's not in his blood to sit around the house all day, just hang out and go for a walk in the morning. He needs to
Yeah.
get out and move and run and be the athlete that he was bred to be. And that's just fine, you know,
Yeah.
but it's important that people know that, because I wouldn't recommend a dog like Rev to my cousins.
Right.
But I'd absolutely recommend a lot of the people I know and the breeders with golden retrievers and stuff in the area, or, you know, there's a lot of breeders I know that I would say, yeah, get one of those dogs. It'd be awesome for you. You guys can take it for a walk in the morning. It'll hang out around in the kennel while you're at work, and you can bring it in at night, and it'll hang out and lay by the fire while you guys read and watch a movie, and, you know, it'd just be an awesome companion dog for the lifestyle that they live. But it's important to understand that preference from a buying standpoint, to know what you're looking for.
And it's important to recognize that there are going to be traits similar. You're going to see certain traits more prolifically in certain breeds.
Mm-hmm.
However, within every breed, there's every type.
Yep.
And so the family is critical, right? The
Yeah.
breed that you thought was right, reading the breed description, you get in the wrong family and it's not going to be the right dog for you.
Yep.
And you might read a breed description and think, oh, that breed's not for me. But then you find the right family and it is for you.
Yep.
You know, that dog would work just fine because of the traits that it has. And so I think a lot of time spent talking about breed when the time needs to be spent talking about family within the breed.
For sure.
You know, the breed might lead you to a general idea of, it seems like there's more families within this breed that would fit my lifestyle than other breeds. And so it's not to say breed's not of importance, but it doesn't tell you all. You know, it doesn't tell you nearly as much as family will tell you.
Yeah.
So,
For sure.
yeah, very cool. Well, those were some fun topics that we had talked about with Jerry, and unfortunately we did that talking prior to the camera being set up.
Didn't get the camera going quite as fast as we were hoping.
I think we covered it. I think we covered it pretty good, and it was good. Good topic. They're good. Yeah, they're good things to think about and talk about, and, you know, consider whether you're buying a dog from, you're going to buy your next dog from somebody, or whether you're a breeder yourself and you're going to breed them. And I loved your comment about, I wanted to just make one more comment on your comment regarding not breeding for the public. And, you know, I've bred a lot of dogs, and I've bred a lot of horses. And in both cases, I have adopted the exact same ideal or idea, and that's that I'm going to breed for the animal that's my ideal. And I just touched my mic. Maybe you'll hear that. And that's how I'm going to breed. And yes, I'm going to breed animals that I'm going to sell to the public, but I don't make my decision for the public. You know, and the minute I find myself thinking, oh, I'm going to make this cross because I've had a lot of guys call me looking for such and such, you know, say tricolor or tricolor female. That seems to be what everybody's looking for, you know, is a tricolor female English setter. But if I'm making my choices and that comes into my mind, I always check myself, because that is never going to be the reason that I make my choices. My choices will be made trying to produce my ideal of a dog. And I trust that other people will like it because I use my dogs heavily. You know, I compete with my dogs. So I know there's going to be a buying public for the puppies that we have to sell. And my goal is to sell as nice a puppies as I possibly can to people. But that's going to happen because I'm breeding for my ideal, not because I'm watching the market and the fads in the market and the popularity of certain bloodlines and those kind of things, making decisions to create the right ad to draw buyers for my puppies. And that I have a real problem with. I mean, those are the things that I think get us headed the wrong direction in the horse industry and in the dog industry, is when we're starting to breed for the sale instead of breed for the quality of animal and for the ideal that we hold for that animal. Because you start making decisions that are going to fall short of everybody's true desire for the animal, because you're sacrificing for the immediate want of or fad or anything in the industry. So I think that was a good thing to point out.
Yeah. So I hope you all enjoyed the conversation with Jerry, and then the little bit of talking we've done here afterwards. Check him out. Like I said, we'll have the link in the description to his website and yeah, some information about him and his blogs and things like that. So we appreciate you watching the video, and we'll see you in the next one.
Keep following us. We're always trying to learn a little bit more so we can do a little bit better job, but we enjoy helping. We enjoy gaining knowledge, and we enjoy helping share the knowledge that's floating around there from so many wonderful, intelligent minds.
Yep.
So
absolutely. Awesome. We'll see you in the next video.